My brother's over, so he's just arrived and they're staying with them.
Where's your mom?
He's like, do you want to speak to your brother and your nephew? It's like, no, I'm recording my podcast about Dungeons and Dragons right now.
Priorities. Hello and welcome to Incomplete Geeks, a gay geek podcast. I'm John, that's Nick, and this is episode 15, where we take being a dungeon master to a whole new level. Slide into our DMs as we talk about Dungeons and Dragons on this episode. How are you today, Nick?
Oh, that was so perfect. You bitch. You bitch. I really wanted you to fuck that up, but that was...
Oh, it might be that I've worked in radio before.
It may be that you're a voice actor, and that was brilliant. Way better.
It might be, was it? I've done this before.
I'm slightly drunk, just for the viewers.
Oh, that's fantastic, because so am I. That's such a coincidence.
If you hear clunks, that's me putting my Brewdog Punk IPA down on my bougie desk, and I apologize. Well, we're hopefully going to do some drunk episodes soon, because the drunk episode of the Star Wars one, it wasn't supposed to be an episode, but I found it really fucking funny. And
it was funny. It was really fun as well.
So yeah, we're going to do some drunk rants about stuff in the future. So if you have any suggestions or anything you want us to just get drunk and vamp and rant about, please write in.
Because we will.
We'll do it. I'll do it now. It's fine. Yeah. Write in incompletegeekspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Let's go.
And also, speaking of, so we'll get to talking about Dungeons & Dragons during this episode. But before we get there, I thought we could have a bit of listener feedback. We can talk about somebody actually wrote in and was talking to us about our Doctor Who episode. Because obviously Doctor Who is a very popular thing in Britain, and of course you get the geeks, and of course a lot of them are gay. So episode 9 was on the subject of Doctor Who, and I thought it would be nice to sort of read what this listener wrote in. I did ask permission, so it is fine.
Lovely.
And by the way, Nick, you've not seen this at all, so this is all sort of...
I know there is a message. I saw that there is one, but I haven't read it, so I will let you read it out, dramatic reading style.
Yes, dramatic reading style. So listener Stephen C. writes in to say, "Hi, John and Nick. I listened to your podcast on the subject of Doctor Who. I was very impressed with your knowledge of the program. I've been watching Doctor Who since 1970, when John Pertwee took over the lead role. Tom Baker is the longest-serving actor to play the part of the Doctor, with a total of 9 companions throughout his reign, Sarah Jane Smith being mine and most fans' favorite. Well, I think she deserves a mention because she's very popular and very good. I preferred the classic episode format with 4 or 6 25-minute long episodes to each story, all ending in cliffhangers to make the viewers tune in next week for the next episode, rather than the 1-hour storyline that we now have with no cliffhangers. I'm looking forward to Ncuti Gatwa's newest regeneration. The rumor at the moment, amongst Doctor Who fans, is that Jodie Whittaker doesn't regenerate into Ncuti Gatwa right away, but rather into a new regeneration played by David Tennant, making him the second actor to have played the part of the Doctor twice, after Tom Baker played a different version of the Doctor in the 50th anniversary special." Okay, you still following?
Still following.
Okay. You mentioned that there is more than 14 versions of the Doctor. This is true because Jodie Whittaker's Doctor was told and shown by the Doctor's archenemy, the Master, who is another Time Lord, the truth of the Time Lord's creation. And up until now, we've been under the impression that a Time Lord can only regenerate 11 times, but this is not true, and the Time Lords have hidden that fact from the Doctor. By the way, there's a lot of information here, and I'm cutting out a lot. I'm not reading this entire thing. I'm cutting out a bit, so I'm not reading everything. But I could go on and on about Doctor Who facts and info because I'm a massive fan. I'll stop here, though. I enjoyed your Doctor Who podcast, and you should do a follow-up, Doctor Who related. Oh, and one more controversial thing. Did you like my dramatic pause there? This ties into a different episode that we talked about. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
One more controversial thing. I've always said J.K. Rowling copies certain elements of Doctor Who in her Harry Potter stories. Really? I'm seeing your face here now. In the Tom Baker era, there was a story arc for a whole series called The Key to Time. Basically, the key to time kept order to the universe, stopping havoc and catastrophe. But the Black Guardian wanted to get his hands on the key to time for evil purposes. The White Guardian split the key into 6 segments and scattered them in time and space. He employed the Doctor to find the 6 segments and restore harmony to the universe. These 6 segments could take the form of inanimate objects or living people. J.K. Rowling's version of the Black Guardian was Voldemort, and the White Guardian was Dumbledore. The Doctor was Harry Potter, and the 6 segments of the key to time were the Horcruxes. Yeah. So also in Fantastic Beasts, the briefcase is bigger on the inside, just like the TARDIS. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm not a true fan of Harry Potter. Sorry again for going over the top with Doctor Who information. As you can see, it's my passion.
I love it.
There you go.
So great. So she's not only a transphobe, but she's completely unoriginal. Fine.
Yeah. What do you think about that, though? Like, what do you think? That did she steal this idea?
God, there's probably like a proper official quote, but I'm sure. Bollocks! I'm so stupid. All art is imitation or something like that. It's like a famous quote. Yeah. All art. It's like everybody copies everything, whether you're a writer, an artist, a musician, everything like that. It all is. It's all interpolation of what you've seen before. So yes, she's trash, but
yeah, I can see that. Like, I can see that there's similarities. I'm not sure about like.
But that's bonkers. Is it the same number of whatever's as Horcruxes?
I think so. Because
that's creepy. Because there
was 6 segments to the key of time. Apparently, I've not seen those episodes. But then in Harry Potter, he splits the Horcruxes, and I think the 7th one is either him or it's the scar on Harry Potter's forehead. I don't remember, but I think it is.
Close. Yeah, pretty damn close.
Yeah, pretty damn close.
That's so cool.
I mean, the thing is about being... here's a nice tie-in to this episode. The thing about being bigger on the inside than the outside, I don't think that is only... that's. I'm not sure if the TARDIS was the first thing to do that, but there's things in other art as well. In D&D, there's a item called the Bag of Holding, which every sort of party has to have, because it's basically a bag where you just shove shit in it, like the loot you collect.
Mary Poppins' bag is the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can see that. But I do also think that there are probably unintentional similarities when it comes to sort of like, yeah. The Black Guardian and the White Guardian, I should point out as well, were both portrayed on screen by white men. So it's not like
jeez.
So it wasn't like when I talk about the Black Guardian and the White Guardian, it's not
racially charged.
It's racially charged. Yeah, but thank you, Stephen C, for writing in. It was very nice to sort of see that, and
I love it. That's literally the whole point of this podcast.
Yes,
is not to become rich and famous, but is to connect with other gay geeks and to find out how nerdy 100%. You are about your geekeries. Because each of us has our own very specific things that we fucking nerd out about, and we want to know about yours, and I want to learn more about yours, the ones that I don't know about. So thank you so much. That's awesome. Love it.
Well, I couldn't have said it better. So yeah, if you are listening to this and you agree, disagree, what do you think? Did J.K. Rowling steal elements from Doctor Who? Let us know. Write in at incompletegeekspodcast@gmail.com.
I'd love to hear from you.
Let's move on. Did you have something to bring up about Geekery the Weekery stuff?
2 seconds. Let's do a very, very brief, because we're going to have a lot to talk about. A very brief Geekery of the Weekery.
Let's do it.
Previously on X-Men.
Geekery of the Weekery.
So my thing is just going back to my love of Star Trek.
Really?
I'm still in the process of catching up with Strange New Worlds. It is possibly one of my favorite Star Treks because it's such a return to the very classical formula. And the guys are really hot in it. So I'm really enjoying that.
Is this the Captain Daddy one?
Captain Daddy. It's like I finally got to the episode where he's like naked in bed with someone that people have been telling me about for ages. And I was like, I've seen Spock topless twice now and no Captain Daddy topless. And I finally got to the Captain Daddy episode. And I'm like, this is...
So this is Brave New Worlds. This is Captain Daddy.
Strange New Worlds, yes. Strange New Worlds. Yes, so I'm still into that. Love it, but I'm still behind. I'm like, I don't want to rush through it because I enjoy having a lovely show. Mm-hmm. But what I do want to talk about that I am up to date with is the Orville, and I wonder if you're watching that as well.
I actually am, but I will say as well that this is one of my pandemic shows because my mother is very much into this show as well, and she was like, "Oh, you would love it," because she's a big Seth MacFarlane fan as well.
Love it.
I could talk about the Orville, but I'm about halfway through season 2. I'm still catching up because I'm slow to everything, late to every party. I've seen the first season, and I've seen some of the second season.
I think we're on 3 now because there was a massive hiatus where like shit was going on before pandemic about which network was going to pick them up or whatever like that.
Probably.
So I think they moved from Fox to Hulu. Or I don't know. I don't know anymore. But they're on Disney Plus, so yes. I'm catching up now, and it's weekly now because I'm all caught up. Oh, cool. And I know it started off quite Seth MacFarlane-y with like jokes and sarcasm, and it still has swearing, which I love.
Yeah.
But as it's progressed, it's kind of like, obviously he's in it and there's some swearing and that sort of stuff. It's kind of moved away from it, and it's pretty much just Star Trek because it's the same producers who did TNG and I think Voyager as well. Yeah, and I was just like, it's weird because you used to have because Discovery was quite overly serious and dramatic and that sort of stuff, and Orville was super comedic and like sarcastic and everything like that. So you had it's a nice split. You can have both. It's fine. But now with Strange New Worlds being in that universe, but then also a little bit more episodic, and then this as well, it's like you kind of don't want to watch them all at the same time because it's like, which universe am I in? Which one am I enjoying? That sort of stuff. Oh God, that's shit. Sorry.
That's exactly why I can't watch Voyager as well as what did I say I couldn't do? I couldn't watch Discovery. I couldn't watch Discovery as well as TNG when I was watching that one. So I really why I really want to watch. I want to finish Voyager so that I can go on to like the modern ones, I suppose.
Yeah, you do really need to, for the pod. But it's great, so it's really good. So I'm really enjoying it. And like the latest episode, I don't want to. No, maybe I can't, because if you're watching it, I can't give stuff away. Like,
I'll forget by the time I get there. So if you
it's just nice because it kind of. I mean, Strange New Worlds they're very similar in that they are very, very much like a commentary on the world. Like they do the whole sci-fi thing, and then it's like, we're talking about you. Like, that's like, we sacrificed one child to save a life. Are you saying that on your world, children aren't exploited for labor and treated horribly? You just don't know about it and don't think about it. We at least know about it and think about it. And I'm like,
at least we're upfront about it. Yeah.
It's like, oh God, no. Child labor. It's like, oh shit.
Oh my God, Star Trek, you've exposed the deepest part of me that I was trying to hide.
But also, but even Orville, which is you would think is the more kind of comedic one, it does a lot of like questioning about like what it means to be a human, because they've done time travel stuff, and a guy had to sacrifice his whole family.
They did that from season 1. They did that there's an episode, I think it was episode 3 or maybe if it was 4, where I forget his name. The Worf piss take. What's his name? The Mucklin guy.
The Mucklin guy.
And they have a baby, and the baby's like a girl instead of a boy. And there's a whole thing about it being a
she comes up. They come up a lot, and it's really good. And they kind of carry on that story, and that it's really good. But because they're kind of taking it more seriously, it's the divide between them and Star Trek has gotten closer. It's like, I feel you need to make more jokes, guys. Like every now and then,
once in a while, just fart on camera or something.
A little bit, just a little bit of that. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, I'm loving the Orville, and I'm loving the whole and Strange New Worlds, and the kind of. We should do an episode where we talk about all the things they kind of philosophically bring up, and we're like, would you do this? Would you do that? Do you agree with this? Do you agree with that?
Are you talking about Orville or Star Trek or both?
All of it.
Oh my God, that's going to be. I would need to prepare for that. Think about all the sort of.
No, we would need to if we know which ones they are, but then it should be your reaction. Like my thing is would you ever consider being in a romantic relationship with a robot?
Yes.
That was easy. Me too. Yes.
What do you have? Do you have different opinions about teleportation now, knowing that you're basically destroying every molecule in your body? And
I can't get over that. I can't get past that. And it's something that's also comes up in the X-Men with the whole Resurrection Protocol about the fact that it's a clone of you and it has your memories. Anyway, maybe we should do that. Let's do a drunk philosophical Star Trek episode. A drunk rant about Star Trek philosophies. That'd be fun.
We got so much on the dock.
That's a lot.
Docket. On the docket.
Anyway, yeah, so cool.
Okay.
Catch up with Orville and we can talk about it. It'd be great.
I will put it on the top of my list.
Disney Plus.
Perfect. It's there. So we get on to our main topic.
Let's get on to the main topic.
There is no winner because it's about teamwork where all of us work together to eventually beat the winner.
So we're talking about D&D, and I really wanted to talk about D&D for a while because it's on our fucking artwork. On D&D.
It is, but it's also one of the reasons that we bonded and came up with this idea. First of all, Star Trek Voyager. We were talking over Budachang tea about how you're rewatching Voyager, and I got really excited about that.
Yes, I remember my Budachang, yeah.
And then I was talking about how I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, and I think and that's the whole point. It's a geekery that I really want to learn more about, and I want to understand more because people talk about it all the time, and there's been people who play it, but it's a really big deal to get into it because I don't understand how you play it, so I wouldn't want to just show up. I'm like, what do I do with this? So.
That's kind of fine because I think there's where D&D has come nowadays is because it's been around for so long. It's more of a it's kind of like how we think of the 80s now. Like it was there, we might make fun of it, but it's still like there as a sort of a history, like a cultural touchstone. But the thing is, D&D is still around nowadays, and it's gone through so many changes. I think it's much more accessible nowadays for people who want to learn. And obviously, there's going to be young people, no matter what time. No matter what era you're in, there's going to be young people who are interested in it. And so they're going to learn about it.
And old people, just FYI.
Yeah, fair. But my point is like, there's never going to be a time where people stop learning about it.
More accessible than I'm probably thinking. Because I think it's like, I can't start unless someone... I don't even know how to find a game. Like, it's impossible. I don't... Yeah. So that's kind of... we started talking about that, and that's... And we realized that we nerded out together, and we thought this would sound hilarious.
If we talked about it, yeah.
So that's where we are.
So if you're listening in now, you are listening to finally after 15 episodes. This is what we want to talk about. Yeah. this is what brought us together.
Yeah,
because I think board games, and to another extent video games as well, is a different kind of nerdiness, a different kind of geekiness, because basically board game geeks are a very specific, not that there's not overlap, but it's a very specific type of geek that is a board game geek. Yeah. Like video game geek, and there's no necessarily overlap. Sometimes there is. That's true.
Just like comic book geek is very different from sci-fi geek, and you can overlap, but you don't always have to. Board games, they're a Christmas thing.
Yeah, a Christmas thing.
But people do it a lot.
I'll take that a step further as well and say that board game geeks are one aspect of it, and RPG geeks are different. So RPG is a role-playing game where technically D&D, as an example, doesn't have a board. So it's not a board game. It's more of a tabletop game. And it's a tabletop RPG. So you pick a role, and all board games are tabletop games.
But not all tabletop games are board games because they don't have a board.
Yeah, fair enough. As I said that, I was like, is that true?
World of Warcraft, that's a different thing as well, isn't it? Because
World of Warcraft is a video game.
But it's a tabletop as well.
You might be thinking of Warhammer.
Oh, bollock and a fuck. Maybe
yeah, that's fine. So Warhammer is... I don't have any experience with Warhammer.
The one that Henry Cavill plays?
Yeah. So, side note, I was watching an interview with Joe Manganiello.
Manganiello.
Who's Elsie Herveau from True Blood, very buff, very you can...
Magic Mike's Sofia Vergara's husband.
Oh yeah. I forget about her. I love her, but I forget about her when I think about him.
There's her and there's Joe, and we're thinking about Joe.
Joe, yeah. Joe is a big D&D nerd. So he was talking about bringing this to a larger audience. He's got some brand, which we're not going to plug because obviously they don't sponsor us. But if you want to, you can write it.
Please write it.
So I start by getting into what it is, or sort of talk about the history of it. Because baby, I got notes.
Okay, so I don't know anything about it. So
okay.
Give me the cliff notes of what is Dungeons and Dragons, because I know Gary Gygax created it because he was in Futurama, and then when
he? Okay.
he did the voice of Gary Gygax in it, and then when they did the Dungeons and Dragons themed 4-part episode, it was dedicated to him because he'd passed away at that point.
Oh yes,
which is another reason why I knew of it, because I love Futurama, and it's such a huge, and it just references so many geek cultures.
Yeah,
they do that, and I was like, I want to know more about it.
That's cute. I'll give you the brief overview of it because basically everyone knows it as it's stereotypically like a nerdy sort of geek thing that, you know, guys will sit around a table and like roll dice and tell stories. It is very much a role playing game. It's like you pick a character, and the whole concept of it is you choose a character. You develop this person that you're playing as. That character can have any sort of powers. It could be like magical powers or just like, you know, physical powers, and you work together to sort of tell a story. And that story can be anything between a campaign that is published by the people who make Dungeons and Dragons, and they have like a story, or it can be like a homebrew kind of thing, like where the dungeon master or the DM can sort of make up their own story and lead the characters through it. The whole idea is that you have a certain number of player characters or PCs, usually between like anywhere, like you have like any number of it, but usually if you get above 6, it just gets a bit much. But a group of people who are working together, adventurers, and then you have one person who is the dungeon master, or in more recent versions, it's called the game master or GM. So the GM is basically the narrator, the storyteller, and they take the part, they play the part of every non-player character or NPC. Where when you are developing a story, the adventurers have to sort of work with and figure out, like, you know, fight the baddie or figure out the mystery or whatever. So when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or its offshoot Pathfinder, it's there's 2 modes. There's like storytelling mode where you all are just telling stories, and the characters will the narrator will set up a scenario. Like, okay, the 4 of you walk into a bar, and, you know, you see like a table here with like 2 humans, and over there the bartender's an elf who's, you know, long hair and looks.
Oh my God, I love this. This is awesome. That's
and on the far table there's like 2 dwarves playing a game of dice, whatever. What do you do? And the players can sort of say, well, I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to go talk to the dwarves or whatever. And then everything that you do, the narrator, the DM or GM can sort of say, okay, well, then the bartender says, what would you like? And they can interact in that way. So you're playing roles.
It feels something like 1980s shitty video games, or like where you had like
kind of, yeah,
pixelated, and it's like, do you want to talk to the bar wench? Yes, no, that sort of stuff. It was a very kind of like decision path, that sort of stuff. That's kind of how that reminds me of.
I mean, it's not unlike that, you know.
I'm pretty sure that's where they stole it from.
It's less text based. So, but the thing is, like, when you interact with these characters, if you have to do something that you could fail at, then you have to roll the dice to see if you succeed. So, depending on your character, you could be really good at. You have different stats, and you could be really good at strength, or you could be really good at wisdom, for example, or intelligence. And so, to give you an example, like if you wanted to go to the dwarves and throw the table, you might have to roll the dice to see if you succeed. So you roll the dice that corresponds to your strength, and you roll the dice, and if it goes over a certain amount, then you succeed. If you don't, then you fail, and you tried to throw the table, but you don't, and then the story progresses that way.
Who decides your stats?
So you do. So if you are playing, depending on your race, which is then later called ancestry. So if you are like a human or an elf or an orc or dwarf or whatever, you might have certain stats that lean towards one way. So you might be better towards intelligence, or you might be more geared towards strength and dexterity. And then after that, you choose your class, which says you want to be a wizard or a fighter or a bard or a thief or whatever.
Who's going to be a bard? Fuck off.
Bards are very versatile and very useful as well, because they basically boost the character.
Toss a coin to your witcher.
Yeah, he was a bard.
Yeah.
But in the realm of D&D, like, they basically boost everyone else's stats, which can come in handy very well. So though based on the class you choose, that gives you a boost to sort of strength or your constitution, your charisma or whatever. So throughout playing the game, there's like a level 1 character, which are very, very basic. And then as you play, you level up and gain more boosts to your stats. You can gain certain powers that you would have before, and you can really fine-tune your character into, I want to be a bard that specializes in dancing, or I want to be a fighter that specializes in like magic casting as well as fighting, or I want to be a wizard that specializes in conjuration or something.
And
very,
can you
very
just
versatile.
and can you just like choose whatever, or is it like a handbook of like wizards can often specialize in and you can choose which one, or you can just be like, I'm a wizard and I'm going to specialize in psychedelic drugs with dildos.
I literally had a friend of mine who I wanted to convince to play, and he was like, "Okay, I'll be wizard, but I want my wand to be a dildo."
Fantastic.
And I was like,
"Fantastic!
You could probably do that." Amazing. I will say the answer to your question is you can do a bit of both, because basically the player's handbook is it's a thick fucking book. I can show you, but it's like a guide. But if you can make the story work, you can do anything. You could. That's kind of what the appeal is, because you can sort of, as long as you don't develop a character that is against the party's goal, you can do anything. So if you want to say like, I want to be an evil character and I just care about like destroying things and killing people, you're probably not gonna get along with the rest of the group unless you make a campaign that is all about destroying things. But as long as you can work together, you really have a lot of potential, and you can do like if you took sort of psychedelic drugs, you can say, okay, you're a wizard that specializes in alchemy, and you can sort of put together things that will enhance this and that. Like you make the rules of the game work for your story.
Could you not, like, if you wanted to like be evil, could you all be like, as long as everybody in your like troop agrees, like could you just like, we just want to kill everyone and like steal loads of shit?
Yeah. If you wanted to make a campaign that was like, this is an evil campaign and you are going through this thing.
Make it a campaign. What does that mean?
So a campaign, when I say campaign, that just means like an overarching story. So the company that creates Dungeons and Dragons, they'll create like a little mini book where it says, this is the campaign, this is the story, where you can take your characters from level 1 to, I don't know, all the way up to 20, because 20 is the maximum. And basically you go through, there's like some mystery, there's some story that has to unfold, and you as the character will be led by the DM through the story. And to a certain extent you can do whatever you want to, because you want to be able to sort of, decide that I'm going to, instead of going into the pub, I want to go across the street to the apothecary, or I'm going to go down the road and sort of sing a song in the town square. There's that element as well, but you also do have to follow the storyline a little bit, otherwise it gets out of hand. So you mentioned Gary Gygax. So everyone thinks about Gary Gygax writing the original rules for Dungeons and Dragons, which was 1974. But at the time, there was only 3 classes, only 4 races, and the whole idea was that it was based on another game's mechanics. And so in order to play it at the time, you had to know this other game as well. And the general sort of vibe was that it was a bit disorganized. And then it was popular enough that through the next couple of years, they developed more books so that you could have more classes, more spells, more monsters, and have additional rules, so that in 1977 they came out with what's called Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And that became kind of what we call first edition at the moment. And then they sort of went through a few sort of rules revamps and sort of new ideas. And I'm not going to get into all of them, but I will say that in 2003 they came out with what was called edition 3.5. So they had a third edition, and then they tweaked it slightly to help make people happy. So they call it 3.5. And then that was out for a very short time before they released 4th edition in 2007, which was more of a focus on the battle element instead of the role-playing element. And people were really upset. And
didn't like that.
Yeah, they didn't like that. So they started playing other games. And then the offshoot Pathfinder came out, which was based on 3.5, and that was 2009. Nowadays, we have 5th edition. So they kind of basically Dungeons & Dragons was like, we're going to learn from our mistakes. We're going to workshop this next edition and sort of play test it for a bit. So that started in 2012. And then 2014 was when 5th edition came out. And that's what we have nowadays.
Is there a plan for a sixth?
Probably. We don't know yet because they are not going to. Obviously, they one of the things that bit them in the butt for 4th edition was it came out really quickly after 3.5, and people hadn't sort of had time to sort of play with it.
I imagine it takes so long to play a D&D game or campaign or whatever. Like you don't need constant new versions because you could be playing one for fucking years.
You don't, and the thing is, because there's so many different ways to play it. If you're like me, like I will play a character and get to know that character, how that character works, what the mechanics are, what the strategy is, and then I'll be like, okay, I can do the same thing again and play a completely different character and still enjoy it. Learn about, okay, now I'm going to be, a rogue that wants to be sneaky instead of up front and bashing the enemies, kind of thing.
How long does a typical game last? Like, and like, what's the longest you play? Like, is it do you like start and finish in an afternoon, or is it like?
So, I've heard stories about groups who go to board game bars, and there's a lot of them in London now. So you can like reserve a table at a board game bar, and then just sort of play D&D for the entire afternoon. Like, it can get to that point, but I don't imagine they meet very often because I currently am in a weekly D&D group. It's actually a Pathfinder group, but I'm currently in a group where we play like anywhere between 3 and 4 hours every week, and that's like my entire evening. That's my Pathfinder evening.
Is that like one story start to finish done in an evening? Like, you don't like we'll pause and we'll carry this on next week and then next week and the next week, and you like, no, we play until we finish and then we're done, and then we'll do a new one next week, like that.
So things are constantly being released. And at the moment, we're playing a campaign where there's like a part 1 that lasted about, I want to say like maybe like 2 months or so, 2 or 3 months.
Oh,
between like 2 and 3 months. And I was like, we weren't playing every single week, but it was pretty much every single week. And that was book 1. And we've just started book 2. And like chapter 1, we got through in like 3 weeks. So they can actually be really drawn out.
God.
Yeah. It depends on the choices you make as a player too. Because if you say, I could go into that, that dungeon where people are telling me to go, or I can sort of sit out here and, make soup. And the DM has to sort of just go along with whatever you say.
How did you get into it?
So I got into it like I do anything that is very geeky. Is I got into it through an ex.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Of course it was. It's how I got into Doctor Who. It's how I got into D&D. So basically, 5th edition came out of D&D, and my ex, he was really big into it back in the day, and he was like, "Oh my god, 5th edition came out. I heard it's really good. It's been play tested. They've workshopped it. Let's try it out." And I, of course, was like, "Sure, fantasy setting. I can pretend to be whatever I want to, kind of thing." And I just sort of got into it. No idea what I was doing. It made enough sense to me that I sort of kept playing with it. We tried different things, different groups, whatever.
Did you do Dungeons and Dragons roleplay sex?
Unfortunately not.
Oh.
Now that I think about it, he probably would have been really into it if I suggested it. If I was like, hey,
roll for cunnilingus. I don't know.
roll for initiative. Like, you put on this leather and pretend to be I don't know, it's just role playing. You can adapt role playing to whatever you want to.
Oh my god. So could you like have a script or like a thing, and then you like roll to see like what level of sexual things you do?
So if you're playing a character and you sort of are romantically interested in another character, if it's a non-player character that you're interested in, then you can actually sort of roll dice to see how well you do on a date. So one of your stats is charisma. And so if your charisma is very low, like if you're an orc, your charisma is probably not very high. If you're a bard, it's probably pretty high, So if you're going on a date with somebody and you try to like chat them up, you roll on the dice for charisma. Oh. So if you've ever heard the term D20, that refers to a 20-sided die. Yeah, there you go. If ever you roll a 1, that's like an automatic fail. No matter how good you are at that skill, you are failing it. If you roll a 20, that's called a crit. So you've had a critical success or a critical roll, and you succeed no matter what. So yeah, it was through an ex, and before I split up with that ex, I got into another group that was more interested in Pathfinder, and I'm still with that group now.
Lovely.
So if you're listening, hi Dan, and the rest of you. But yeah, so Pathfinder. So nowadays we have 5th ed of D&D, and Pathfinder has come out with a 2nd edition of Pathfinder. So Pathfinder 2e is what they call it, or 2nd edition. I think that in my groups as well, it really sort of changed through the pandemic. So because obviously you weren't allowed to sort of meet in a group and go to a bar and have a table, or go to a friend's house and sort of roll dice on a table, it fundamentally changed the way we play these kind of RPGs, because instead of doing stuff in person, you're doing it online. And so online, instead of having to draw, like physically draw a map, and you have these little figures, which are a throwback to Warhammer. You have these little figurines which are particular characters, and popping them along the map. It's all online. It's all digital. So the maps are, pretty easy to make. And on the one hand, it's really easy to sort of put together your stats, because sometimes there's a lot of moving parts going on. But rolling the dice is automatic. You just click a button and it rolls the dice for you. So it's less fun than actually physically rolling the dice, but it takes a lot of the faff out of it as well.
That's quite good. I like that.
And also obviously you can play anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere to sort of join a table. You can just sort of say, I'm going to log on to Zoom or Discord or whatever, and sort of play with people from around the world, which I've done before.
Could you do that as a beginner?
Yes. I think so. Hypothetically speaking, if I were to create a group, which is not that hypothetical, I'm actually thinking about doing this, but if I were to create a group of people who had never played before, which is perfect, because I've never DM'd before, like you, for example, I would say, there's any number of online resources to create a character. So you pick the kind of person you want to play as, if you want to play as like a magic user, or just a fighter version, or a mix between both. You can do that. And because there's so many things being released constantly, like new spells, new sort of stories, there's a lot of options there. And I would sit down with each player and say, this is your character, this is what you can do, here are your stats, and then this is like a basic level 1 thing. And that's pretty easy. And then you choose a day, you choose a time of day, you say, we're going to meet on, a Thursday at 7 p.m. Here's the Zoom link, whatever. And also,
here's the link.
Huh?
Should we start one?
I'm literally
listeners?
like, with the listeners, yeah. Oh, you know what? Okay, here's the thing. It's funny that you mentioned that, because there are literally YouTube channels for that. Do you remember when I was talking about Matt Mercer before? He's the DM for a group that's been going on for years, and they're all voice actors, by the way. So they're all sort of pretending to be this, and it just so happened that they are playing a campaign with him as the DM. I'm pretty sure it's homebrew, but they've been doing it for so long. Someone just said, you should make a YouTube channel out of this. And it exploded.
There's tons of them.
There's now a TV show cartoon based on their characters.
Which cartoon? Vox Machina?
Vox Machina, yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Oh my god, I love it! I saw that. I watched all of that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's based on characters that they create. It's Amazon, yeah.
Oh, it's on Amazon. It's fucking great, because it's fantasy cartoon with swearing, violence, magic, and sex. It's
pretty much.
It's ticking every single one of my boxes. I love it.
That's literally based on
Critical Role.
I think that they were Pathfinder characters that they then ported into D&D, so it kind of works. But basically, like the whole YouTube channel is about them just playing D&D, and like their sessions last for hours, and there's like hundreds of episodes as well.
That's cool. I know there's. I briefly was like a fan of like College Humor, and they have their own channel where it's just a guy playing, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or something similar, and it's that kind of thing. And it just goes on for like you can. Hours and hours and hours and hours of footage just kind of falls through.
If you are looking for, there's so many podcasts as well that are just people playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like you can either play like legitimate Dungeons and Dragons, or you can just play like a role playing game that is just played for comedy. If I do start a campaign, which I've been talking about for a long time, I just
this is what we were talking about when we met for Buddha Chang Tea.
Did I mention to you at the time that you should join my group. I'm like
that you wanted to test the waters with newbies because you've never DM'd before, and I said please do that. I really want to get in. I want to try it out, and you said great. I'll let you know. And we're 18 months later, and you've done fuck all with it.
18 months, how dare you? You are literally the top of my list of people who might play that.
I damn well better be. I'm your Gay Geek podcast co-host.
You're definitely invited. I need you to decide, though, if I want to play D&D 5th Ed or if I want to play Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which I have more experience with.
We'll do a poll on social media.
5th Edition is really simple-ish. There's less to worry about, but I feel like Pathfinder has more options, but there's a lot of more moving parts. If that makes
Start
sense.
with one and then do the other. Let's get a game going. That's the whole point of this.
Okay, let's do it. Fuck it. Let's just do it. Write in if you want to be part of this.
We will aggressively market this, so that's absolutely.
Who would you play for your first character? What kind of?
Okay. Well, no, wait. Before, okay, I think that's a really great question, and I would love to answer that of what I would play. However, is that a good segue point? Should we talk about my experience with Dungeons and Dragons, which is completely different from yours, which was the 1980s cartoon? Cue the music!
Look out!
Which is not actually dramatic at all. It's like wistful and sad and weird. Yeah, so like my foray, the reason I would one of the reasons, other than geekeriness, that I want to get into Dungeons and Dragons is because I grew up with the cartoon version of Dungeons and Dragons, which is one of my favorites of all time, and certain episodes are fucking fantastic, and they stand up 40 years later.
Really?
I'm a cartoon connoisseur, and the 80s are like, ooh, cartoons do that, but there's a few episodes in it with the way it was written, the drama style of the 80s, the music, that kind of thing, the animation. It's like, shit, this is good. And some of it still stands the test of time, which I think only a few bits do. So I can either tell you about that, or I can tell you about the characters and what they were, and you can tell me if they are actual playable races.
Do we have time to do both? Because races and classes. Because basically, I want to hear. I have zero.
Okay, so
Never saw it.
80s cartoon. It was actually produced by Marvel, same as Transformers. So it was that wonderful, glorious time in the 80s when it was that wonderful thing. I believe, the whole point of doing a cartoon in the 80s was to sell toys.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The interesting thing, normally you produce the toys and then you create a cartoon a la He-Man, which we'll talk about another day. This being the fun fact is they already had, obviously, a super established product that they were going to sell.
Yeah.
The weird thing being that they were never legally allowed to make any of the cartoon characters D&D characters. Like, they couldn't sell because the merchandising rights were owned by whoever owned D&D.
Wizards of the Coast, yeah.
Sure, or whatever it was. And the cartoon rights are owned by those people, so they couldn't, which was stupid. Anyway.
Okay.
But I believe the kind of whole point of it was to make it seem a lot more wholesome, because as you told me, in the 70s and 80s, parents were getting pissed off with Dungeons and Dragons because it was the occult and that sort of stuff.
It really was, yeah. Yeah, they did. There's a bit of is it Satan? Are they fighting Satan? All
that sort of stuff. So it was a kind of a way of them making it more wholesome by making it a Saturday morning cartoon.
Okay.
That's as far as I understand it. So the original ideas were long and complicated, and a veteran came in and be like, no, make it these basic characters, superhero-y style of the week, that kind of stuff. Which they did, and it was very much a kiddie show and that sort of stuff. But they still had a few kind of grown-up-y, or for 80s cartoons, let's be honest, what it was, kind of snuck in. There was an episode where the group of teenagers decided they were going to murder the bad guy and that sort of stuff.
God.
And that they should have done it. You should have fucking fired it right through his forehead. They didn't, because obviously they're like, we'd be no better than you are, whatever, like that. So they kind of pushed the boundaries. Like all of it was, the bad guy had horns and that sort of stuff, because it was, dragons, demonic, that sort of stuff. So they tried
I've seen the DVD cover.
like they tried to make it more wholesome, but like it got a lot of, it never quite hit. And it's a shame, because if they'd taken their time, like some of the episodes were fucking brilliant. And
what was it about those episodes that was like really, really good? Was it just
because they were not too childish, and it was done like the best one that I think. I mean, Dragon's Graveyard was great. That's the one where they're like, we are done with this bad guy stopping us. So, okay, the premise of it is 6 teenagers or whatever, 5 teenagers and a kid go on a ride at a fairground and are accidentally transported to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, where they then take on the roles of these races characters that we'll go into and see if they're actually in the game. So they have magical weapons, but the whole point is that they try to get home. There is a dungeon master, which is a teeny tiny man with magical powers who speaks in riddles and tries to like guide them towards their way home, each time never giving them real answers, so he's a fucking dick. And there's a bad guy called Venger, who was voiced by Peter Cullen, a.k.a. Optimus Prime, because obviously it was the 80s. Yeah. And he just wants the weapons because he's super powerful, but he wants to control the realm, and with the weapons he can do that. So that's the premise. And unfortunately, it got cancelled before they ever wrote an ending, so they never got home. The guy who wrote some of the episodes did write a final episode, and I've watched it on YouTube where they read it out, and one of the actresses comes back to reprise her role, and they do all the reveal, and they get home. So it's lovely. Please Google it. It's absolutely worth it.
Okay.
But it's very much like that 80s cartoon of like, let's get home. We never get home. Let's get home. We don't get home. Which is, if you watch it now, you're like, it's like, that would piss you off. Like nowadays we need a story. But a lot of some of the episodes are done really well. There is an episode called The Dungeon at the Heart of Dawn. And if anybody's listening to this and knows what that is, I love you. Let's message. And like this like ancient magical giant creature, which is just a head on a like light beam that just destroys planets, comes down, and like if you look at his face, you'll lose your powers. It's just so bonkers and huge and weird, and they have to journey to the center of the earth, and he nearly dies. It's very like classic, like weird, dramatic shit, and it's not a very good description. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, fine. I'm listening. I'm listening with a lot of intensity. I'm like, what? Tell me more.
Yeah, and there's some shitty episodes where like Uni makes a friend and it's shit. But there are a few episodes which feel kind of like majestic opera style. And
is Uni the name of the little unicorn pony type
Uni
thing?
is the name of the unicorn, voiced by Frank Welker, who was Megatron and in every single cartoon of all time.
Okay.
Frank Welker is a hero. He's incredible. But he got his paycheck by going, and that was it.
Oh my God.
But yes,
classic.
So I loved it because it was magical and cool, but took the magic a little bit more seriously than some other cartoons in the 80s.
Sure.
They had that sort of stuff.
Which is also why we love Game of Thrones, when it uses magic seriously, kind of thing.
Lots of dragons as well. Tiamat was a great fucking villain. Lots of stuff. It could have been like the mythology, if it had been released now, you'd have a script that was continuous Avatar style, beginning, middle, end, and there would be mythology, and it'd be wonderful. And I think it needs a reboot, but like it will get one because the game is much more popular, so they'll always do the game.
And I'm sure there's like also issues with marketing as well, or marketability and merchandising.
So I'll just love the 80s cartoon forever.
Okay,
and it was wonderful.
So who are these 6 kids?
Okay, so if I'll tell you about each of them, and you can tell me if they had a representation in the game, which I know the first one I'm pretty sure does. So the leader was, oh shit, what's his name?
You're on the spot now. You're failing. Bad geek. I'll tell you.
No, don't you dare. I will look this up. Give me a second.
Close this window.
Because I know what his class is, but I've forgotten his name. I just keep saying the other.
So there are races and there are classes, and races is basically human or elf or orc or dwarf or any combination of those kind of things.
I mean, they're all human, so there's not much like Hank. Oh my god, I'm such a dick. So Hank is the leader, and he is a ranger.
Ranger is a class, yes.
Okay, cool.
And in fact, it's really funny because Ranger, I think both in D&D and Pathfinder, Ranger is kind of derided as like the worst class.
No,
and I don't
really?
know why. Because I don't know enough. There just seems to be a sort of a misbalance with the way their powers work. And a Ranger is basically like you have a bow, an arrow. And that's kind of about it. You can choose to either be like a wilderness kind of ranger or like a scout kind of ranger. But
That sounds fun.
I don't. Yeah, you should be a ranger then, because I would like to.
So he had, obviously all the weapons were magical, and he had a magical bow, and so it was an energy bow. And so it was very much like a writer's trick that the bow could kind of like do anything. So it would either
Infinite arrows
wrap around them, or he could like fire it and it's a ladder, or like he shots it and it's like a cage, like all that kind of thing. It's a very easy way.
Okay.
A little
very
cheap.
Green Lantern.
Yeah, it's a very cheap kind of way of getting around it. Eric was the comic relief and fucking hilarious. He was the Cavalier.
Cavalier is a prestige class, I think. Okay. And what that means is like they kind of combined two different ones. Did he have a mount?
No, he had a shield. His weapon was a magical shield.
Okay, so I think Cavalier is a class you can play, but I think they're mount based. So they always have like a horse or a pony or a bear or whatever else.
They didn't have that. Bobby was a barbarian.
Yep, perfect. Love it. Is it a female barbarian as well?
No, male. He was
Barbie.
a kid. Bobby.
Barbie,
you fucking idiot.
I want to play a barbarian called Barbie.
So do I. Oh my god. No, Bobby was my least favorite. I fucking hate, because he was a kid. He was the kid brother.
Gross.
He had
Boring.
a magical club, which obviously like he could smash the ground and that kind of stuff.
I'm so angry.
It was so annoying.
Yes. Barbarians are one of the obviously they in both Pathfinder and D&D, they basically have the powers based on raging, which they can do like X number of times a day, and then they have special powers.
Barbarian mage.
If they take damage, then they can sort of rage further or whatever.
Gotcha.
I think they're boring to play.
It's a boring character. I hated it. Over reliance on these. That's what annoyed me about the show, was they relied way too much on these three, the straight white boring male characters, and they didn't use the other ones as much. So Bobby's big sister was Sheila, and she was a thief.
Right, so thief is a class, but that was a class from the very, very early, like the 70s, 80s versions. They renamed it Rogue. The class is called Rogue. So a rogue is basically, you can be a thief kind of rogue, or you can be a rogue that's more about like how do I say, like you can be like an illusionist kind of thing. You can have like a rogue that's a bit magic-y kind of thing.
Sheila's power was she had a cloak, and when she put the hood up, she turns invisible. She was my favorite, obviously, because she's a ginger girl with thigh-high boots and a cloak that goes invisible, introvert style. She was my fave. Presto the Magician.
That's not really a class. As far as I know, a magician. In the very, very early D&D, there was only three classes. There was fighter or fighter man or whatever, and there was like a cleric, which is like the healer, and then there was a class called magic user. Okay, and it's very sort of basic, but that evolves in sort of wizard, sorcerer, druid, cleric. Those are all magic users, and so the wizard and sorcerer are the most purely magic users, and their magic comes from different sources. There isn't one called magician, really. So
Presto's power was a magic hat, and he could pull stuff from it. He was also somewhat comic relief because he never really got it right. Like he wants and it's the wrong thing, but it would often work out. And sometimes, like when he was really pissed off or when they're in the right place, like he's the most powerful because he could literally do anything if he stopped being such a dick.
Okay, so that's very the way that they balance magic in D&D is that they're very, very powerful, but the number of times you can use that magic is limited.
Cool.
Yeah, no, not a class.
And lastly was Diana the Acrobat.
Not a class.
No acrobats?
No, acrobat's not a class. I mean, acrobatics is a skill.
It's a skill.
Yeah, so you can be trained in acrobatics or a master in acrobatics, whatever. Typically, acrobatics is a skill utilized by either fighters who want to be very dexterous, or by again rogues who are jumping around a lot, or rangers as well if they're climbing trees, etc.
Her power was a magic staff, and the only interesting thing was it was small, and she did that, and it got big, and she'd like jump with it. It was shit. She was also black, so she was a diversity character, and was like in a like furry bikini and jumped around. So
Furry bikini.
yeah, like a furry barbarian style bikini. Like the barbarian was in barbarian pants and a harness, and she was the acrobat, but in like a full on furry bikini. And her power was a stick. It didn't even go super long, like Chitara style. Like she couldn't like it just went from small so she could carry it in her boobs to like stick size so she could jump. So poor Diana was not well used. However, her only kind of solo episode that I remember was called Child of the Stargazer. The animation wasn't great, but the storyline was dark and weird and wonderful. It was about finding the child of the Stargazer who would destroy the demon, and the demon was a woman with half a face demon and half a face not, and you found that out only halfway through. And like right at the end, she pulled the mask off. Like she had a cloak the whole way through, and right at the end of the dramatic scene, she pulled the cloak down, and half her face is demonic. Fuck me, so good. And the dramatic music is but yeah, Diana wasn't used much because she was a black guy.
Okay. Underutilized.
Underutilized. I would have wished they'd given her cooler powers, but yeah.
Okay.
And then there was Dungeon Master, there was Uni, there was Shadow Demon, and Venger was the bad guy. Which was Twist, which they didn't reveal officially, but has been since revealed, was Dungeon Master's son, who became evil Star Wars star.
I was like, are you going to spoil me?
No. And there was Tiamat, the five-headed dragon, and each dragon...
Tiamat is a legitimate... is Tiamat like from real life lore, history?
Oh, that's interesting. Is it...
Tiamat is a dragon that exists in both D&D and Pathfinder, and it's just literally just the name of a dragon. I wonder if it's... I think
Mesopotamian religion. Yeah, Tiamat is a primordial goddess of the sea. Oh, goddess of the sea. And that's not a dragon name, but they probably just...
Well, I think Tiamat as well. They do this a
Third
lot.
edition.
In both.
Yeah, it's from the... Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
So
yeah,
because I think...
she had 5 heads. That's from the game. And each head had a different breath. So...
breath, yeah.
Yeah, ice, fire, lightning, gas, something...
Poison, acid, whatever. So, this is very similar to World of Warcraft as well, where dragons, they do this in The Witcher as well. Different colors of dragons have different breaths of powers.
Love that shit. I love mythology like that. It's like different colors. It's like I love that. There's a brilliant, God, I don't remember anyone's name on TikTok because I don't look at the names, but I followed him, and like his whole thing is doing the science about how D&D dragons could exist. And like how their powers could work, and because he's like I don't know if he's actually like anatomy biologist person or just a fan of it. Like looking at like, okay, how big could they be? Could they fly? What would they have to be like? And then looks at their different powers and is like, lightning is on one hand the easiest to make, but also absolute bollocks because there's no way you could direct it. You could make it super easy, but no fucking way of directing it. All that kind of stuff. Fucking fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. But also in D&D and Pathfinder, all the dragons tend to sort of morph into human shapes as well, so that they could be sort of characters. Is that not a thing? It does that in The Witcher as well, where the guy is like, spoiler if you've seen The Witcher.
I stopped after a few episodes of season 2, so I couldn't be bothered.
Oh, I quite liked it. I quite liked the production value.
No, he didn't take his top off in season 2, did he?
He didn't. Did he?
I don't see his butt. I'm not interested. I was just there for the bathtub season 1, which I enjoyed.
Which is from the game, actually. I've not played it.
Before, like kind of like a wrap up, sort of. How gay is Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh yeah, I forgot about this question.
And kind of like and if it's not like. Not explicitly gay. I imagine you can play however you want, so you could all be gay in the role playing if you wanted. But is there elements of the whole thing that appeals to the homosexuals, like the aspects of it?
I think the most important the most important thing about the gayness of D&D is that it is so, because there's hardly any limits to what you can do. It's like you role playing in a different world, and yeah, you can totally be in a world where being gay is not, you know, shunned or whatever. And basically, it happens if you are like, I've played characters where, you know, I'm a straight female who sort of hits on the bartender who's male or whatever kind of thing. Or I've also been a character where you know, had a past lover who was the same sex as me, and sort of I keep his soul in my ring on my finger or whatever kind of thing. It's
love that shit.
Yeah, and it gives extra healing. But there's no boundaries at all. And I think that the way it appeals to anybody who's got a good imagination who can create a story, but it appeals especially to LGBT people, in my opinion, because there's no restrictions and there's no judgment and there's no boundaries.
Quite a lot of freedom in the escapism of it. Like, it's such a world you can kind of run away to. Fun. Is there do gays tend, in your experience, do gays tend to play a certain character?
In my experience, no. Okay. I do tend to think that, and this is not a dig against straight people, but I do tend to think that people
awful. It's fine. You can say it. Awful.
There tends to be stereotypes that people sort of gravitate towards. So there's a joke that among, you know, friends of mine who are basically like, if you play with a straight woman, they're always going to play a female elf rogue called Lorelei. Yeah. And that's just who they're going to play as. Or like men will tend to play things like fighters or very obvious sort of brute force characters. Yeah. I tend to feel like people who are LGBT tend to go for more unique characters. They tend to sort of branch out a little bit.
If you would like to take part in a gay pathfinding Dungeons in My Dragons game or anything like that, please get in touch.
Dragons in My Dungeon, what you should have said.
I would like to take part, but I think we need some more players. Get in touch. Tell us about what you'd like to do, or if you're a seasoned DM or are brand new, let's chat. You can email us incompletegeekspodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can also find us on the socials. Message John because he knows about this stuff. I don't, so it's probably a waste of time. His easiest way to get in contact is on Instagram at John Marks, JONMARX, Marks the Spot.
Yep. That's correct.
If you'd like to message me and say I don't know anything, or if you love the 80s cartoon, or you listen to the fan reading of Requiem, the final episode, tweet me at Nick Baker Geek. Any Dungeons and Dragons-y stuff? Let's tell me about it. Let's play a game. Let's go gay Dungeons and Dragons.
Let's bring Nick into the fold. I'm looking forward to this.
Exactly.
You're a proper nerd. Thank you. So if you have any, let us know. Because as you know, I probably have gotten a few things wrong. Not that Nick would know, but I probably missed a few things.
I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, and I feel bad about that. And I'm not because I'm not a complete geek.
But you are working on it.
I am. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye then.